morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining us today for a USAID ASAP webinar. Today's webinar is Writing Abstracts, and we also have a special guest from USAID who's going to talk a bit about the local partner meeting. Next slide, please. Perfect. So I wanted to thank everybody again for joining us. During all of our webinars, we use the Q&A box for any questions. So you'll notice it at the very bottom of your screen. You can certainly use the chat to talk to each other and to the panelists. But when it comes to questions, it's very handy for us to use the Q&A. That way we can track all the questions and try and get them all answered. We have two polls that are going to run today. One's going to happen just after the local partners section, and the second poll will be close to the end of the webinar. And that one will be just a little bit about how you felt about the webinar and other topics you'd like to see. The presentation for today's webinar will be on our website at intrahealth.org/ASAP-resources, and I'll go ahead and include that in the chat so you can click on it. And we also have a large number of past webinars on there as well. I think this is about our 46th webinar. Next slide, please. All right, well, this one says 45, but I think this one included is 46, and we've had over 9,000 attendees. We really want to thank you all for joining us. Next slide, please. Perfect, so we have a couple upcoming webinars. There's usually several per month. So in July, we have Advancing HIV Prevention to Achieve Epidemic Control. And this is a USAID ASAP webinar on the 15th. And then on the 28th, we're going to have a communication strategy webinar. And in addition to that, USAID has a webinar happening on July 14th, and I'm going to include links to these webinars in the chat. So look for that in a couple of minutes. Next slide, please. All right, so Carolina Mejia is the Director of Measurement and Learning for the ASAP project. She's worked at IntraHealth for over 3 years and has a PhD in health services research. She's a public health professional with over 20 years of experience, conducting domestic and international research, monitoring and evaluation, and providing technical assistance, including curricula development, training, and capacity building in the areas of sexual and reproductive health, HIV/AIDS, maternal, child, and newborn health, and gender equity. And today she's here to talk to us about abstract writing techniques and tips. So turning it over to you, Carolyn. Sorry, Carolina, we can't hear you. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. You can hear me now.
Does it sound okay? It's a little quiet, actually. Is there any way to speak up just a touch?
Okay, I'll try my best. Is that better?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm here to talk with you about abstract writing. And before we get started, I would like to put up a poll and ask 3 questions. So, Susan, can we actually have the poll show up?
Absolutely. Here it comes.
Okay. All right, everyone. Are you able to see the questions here? Question number 1 is, how confident are you that you can prepare a successful abstract? Are you not confident at all, somewhat confident, or very confident? The second question is, have you ever written an abstract for a conference as a primary or main author? So this is not just collaborating on the abstract, but actually taking the lead in writing that abstract. And then question number 3 is, if you did, what was the most challenging part about it? So was it coming up with a topic, coming up with a title, the word limit, making the abstract interesting, summarizing the results, or translating the writing into scientific or professional writing, or anything else that, that is not included on the list? All right, I'll give it a few more minutes for people to actually put in their answers. I see the responses are keep fluctuating. Okay, I think we're at time. So Susan, go ahead and end the poll. And these are the results. So for question number one, we see that about how confident are you that you can prepare a successful abstract. We have about 60% of the people saying somewhat confident, and 14% saying very confident, and 29% saying not confident at all. Then we have for the second question, have you ever written an abstract? So it seems like over half of you have written an abstract. And when it comes to the most challenging part of doing so, we see somewhat two main responses, which is coming up with an idea or topic or making the abstract interesting. All right. So not to worry, we're gonna go over some tips and ideas on how to prepare your abstract, how to make it interesting, and come up with just even coming up with our title and just making or translating it to scientific information. So not to worry, we're gonna move on. So I will close this poll now, Susan. And these results are being projected, correct?
Yes,
To
we'll
make
keep
sure.
them.
Okay. All right. So I'll close the poll. Thank you, everyone, for participating in that poll. All right, so here we have 7, and this may vary because you may have your own opinion about this, but the way I see it, I have 7 reasons as to why write an abstract. Number one being you want to raise visibility of your organization's technical work and capabilities. This puts you out there in the main stage. So when you present at a conference, your colleagues, other organizations get to find out as to what your organization has been doing, what you have been doing. So it's really important if you have the opportunity to show off and highlight your expertise at international and national forums. This is also, an even greater reason to get your name out there and be visible for your organization and also for yourself. It also positions you for new projects when you make those connections with other organizations, with funders who are there at the conferences. They see about your ideas. Perhaps you're presenting about something that's very innovative and something that funders may not have seen. So this is an opportunity to do so. And it helps you to think about making better decisions about your projects, whether it's through the process of preparing the abstract or when you're presenting the abstract. So that's also really helpful. It also advances the global knowledge. It's not just for your organization or for you, but also the rest of us want to know what our what has worked, what has not worked, what is out there that it's innovative in the field, and whatever field that may be. And given that, you could become a leader in your field. You could become well known in the work that you're doing. And ultimately, this helps with your own professional development in terms of enhancing promotional opportunities. So it looks great on your CV. You can add all the different abstracts that have been accepted to conferences and where you presented. So these are, I think, some of the main reasons, but you may have others. So let me just talk about here as to how you're gonna you get ready to communicate your results. It's your project or activity ready to be written up. So thinking about some, because a lot of people get nervous about writing an abstract, or perhaps are not that comfortable and coming up with ideas. So first of all, you got to ask yourself, I have a project, there are activities, ideas that could be written up. But then you have to ask yourself, what are, what's the so what of, what we're trying, what I want to present. I want to have something where it's an interesting idea that people are going to care about, and it's going to have this so what question answered. And you got to also ask yourself, is your abstract evidence-based? Do you have solid data to be able to support your findings, your conclusions? So we want to make sure that when we have the more technical, especially those abstracts, they need to be evidence-based. We need to show proof that we've gone through a rigorous process. On the operational side is somewhat similar, and in terms of having solid data, but in this case, for the more operational ones, there is more of flexibility, because you're also telling a story with other factors. And we tend to think that the data is only numbers, or it could be qualitative data that you include, but we want to make sure that we are able to support what we are saying in our story. And also, has the abstract been reviewed by others in your organization? So you want to make sure that you run this idea by your colleagues, your supervisors, others that can give you input and see, okay, this is really a good idea. This is something that would has a high chance of getting accepted, but also it's a story that the organization wants to tell. So to start out, I would say it's do your homework in advance. Start looking at successful abstracts. If the abstracts for now the local partners conference are online, then you go back to those abstracts and you see what are the ones that were successful, what were the topics that they covered. You don't, depending on the topics that are requested for the year that you're wanting to submit. I mean, some of that may have changed, and of course you're not going to duplicate what somebody else has done, but you get an idea of what is out there and how the language that people are using. And not only could you get examples from the place where you're going to submit, but also from other conferences and where people have talked about a similar topic. So it's very good to just look at the themes, at the larger themes. As you saw earlier, Catherine provided the themes that are going to be available for you to choose during this conference. And Catherine also went over the submission guidelines, the instructions. Pay really close attention. You really want to read all of the instructions before you start, to make sure that you follow those instructions. You don't want to find out that there is a 300 word limit when you wrote an abstract that's 500 word limit. You have 500 words and then you're ready to submit and you realize that you got to cut back on the wording. So, and a lot of the conferences also offer a template that where you fill in. They have, for most part, these professional scientific conferences have templates and have an outline of what that abstract should look like. So make sure that that's something that is looked at beforehand and you follow those instructions to the T. So here is, how do we convey this whole abstract? And here you have to think about what was the problem that you were trying to solve. Think about, when you're doing your day-to-day work, there are things that you come across that you say, oh, this is something that is really important. This is something that should be documented. And so you want to be able to tell a story of, what was that problem that you were trying to solve? And then what did you do about it? What steps did you take to improve what was the problem, or change, or make some sort of radical, or some sort of way forward as to fixing that problem? And then once you made that change, what did you do? So you want to be able to see what you did and what did you find out. And after all this, after you tell the story, it may be a really interesting story. You may have had change, but what does it really mean? Is it really going to make a difference for people, the communities that you work with, or the organization that you work in? So you want to be confident that there is relevance of this whole story. So what do you include in your abstract? As I mentioned, usually there is that template or guidance on what are the main headings for the conference where you're submitting. But usually there is a pattern that overrides most of the scientific public health conferences that we submit to. So for what is the problem, usually there is a section that they ask you to put in an introduction and background. So here you're going to be showing, okay, what you're going to be giving information of, setting the stage, what happened, what is the background, what is it that people need to know to understand your story in that abstract. And here is, what did you do? That question of what did you do translates into methods that they're going to ask you, what are your methods? What approaches that what did you take? And so on the more operational side, it could be approaches. It's not going to be as perhaps as scripted, or as you would say in the more technical abstracts, where you're putting in information as to, we conducted a survey, we did a sampling of 100 participants. It's much the one that's more operational. You're talking about the approaches that you took. Then we look at what did you find? That usually translates on, what are your results? What are your findings? What is out there? And the question on what does this mean is basically your discussion, your conclusion. So here in very direct terms or questions, we see that this also translates into the sections that you would have for a typical abstract. Okay, so let's break this down of looking at what is the problem. We look at the introduction. We want this section to be short. It's usually 2 or 3 sentences. So it's trying to answer questions about what is already known about the topic. What are the and we want to look at what is unknown. So first you set the stage saying we know X, Y, and Z for this topic on, let's say, prep. And then the next question is, okay, how do we enhance this? How do we, what are things that we could do different? What questions have not been answered? So typically, as I said, this is a very short section of the abstract, and it's just getting to the point of, just setting the stage. And usually it's not a place where, you want to spend a lot of time on. And I would say it's not one of the most important parts, but you do need it because you do want to set the stage. And remember that the reader is interested in your paper or poster because of its findings. It's not because of the introduction. So again, not the most important part. Here is what did you do, the methods. This is the second longest section of the abstract. Here, you are going to tell your story about what you did, what you have done, and and how. What is it that, what was your study design? What was the sample? And this is for the more technical aspect. But again, if you're looking at more operational, on the operational side, you're going to tell also your reader as to what was it that you did to make that change, whether it was changing the way the organization is run, changing procedures in HR, whatever it may be. This is where you provide the details so that people can understand and follow. And usually in scientific research, this section is usually done so that people can replicate what you have done. And we understand that nowadays, with the type of work that we do, sometimes it's more challenging to replicate what we do because some of the situations or the settings that we work in, the populations that we work with are, unique. But we want to be able to show exactly what we did so that people can understand our process. And in many ways, they could pick and say, okay, it may work in this. They tried it in one population, but maybe it could be replicated and we can try it for a different population. So we want to know what was it that you measured. It's really important to know if you are trying to prove that there was a change, you have to show what did it look like before, and later on you're going to show how you measured it so that you can then show what were the findings and how that a change was made and what exactly was that change, if there was any change. So here, this is a key part. This is the longest and the most important part. This is what people care about. They want to know, what are your results? So you had a problem, you made some adjustments, you made changes to it. This is what you found. So in most of the abstracts, we want to say we found X to be this such and such approach is better than this other approach. And then we have the data, which, it shows the conclusion. We can draw from that and, we can show our results looking at before and after, or however it is that you set up your question to show, what your findings were. So, and I have to say, I'm going back here because I want to make sure that in this section that that here you are just showing your results. You don't want to make any commentary as to we knew this was going to happen. We knew that this is a section where you're just being very objective and you're just showing what you found. Then you get to your discussion and conclusion section, and then this is your take-home message. This is the 2 sentences. This is what people are gonna leave your poster session with, or your talk. They're gonna see that this is your takeaway message. You keep it to 2 or 3 sentences, but here it's where you express more of your opinion based on those findings or results. So don't try to extrapolate and make conclusions that are not based on the data. So always go back and look at the data and make sure that that they're based, that your results, you don't want to claim anything that you did not do. So just word of caution there. So here, some of you expressed that you're worried about grabbing people's attention, of coming up with a good title for your presentation. For me, what sometimes I find useful is to have the title come at the very beginning, because it sets the stage for the rest of the abstract. But it could also be done in reverse. Sometimes people write their whole abstract, and once they have the conclusion, they've looked at all the results, then from that they pull their title. But in all, the title should be obvious, should be short, and it's very related to what you're going to speak about. So as people, when you go to conferences and you have a whole list of titles of abstracts that have been accepted, people run through the titles and pick the ones that of course are of most interest to them. So you want to be sure that the people that are going to come to listen to your talk or be there at your poster session are the people that you really meant for them to be there, the ones that are interested in your topic. So you want to be as clear as possible to what that topic is. Make it interesting, catch their attention with their title, with the title that you're offering. Necessary, sub-studies that the study design may be evident in the title, because you have seen probably titles that say case study on maternal and child mortality in Lusaka. So examples like that you can also get from looking at previous conference abstracts, and look at what other people who have studied your topic, what titles are they using, to make sure that with your title, you're grabbing the right audience. So here, I just want to run through an example of starting out with, somebody did a study and it was on HIV testing and counseling among students. Okay, so this is the title for the presentation. And yes, I know this title tells me that, okay, it's about HIV testing and counseling. Okay, and it's among students. But who are the students? Is it primary school students? Is it college students? Who are they? Where are they? Would be interesting to know. In what country, what province, what district? I would want to know more. I mean, this is not really telling me a lot. So the title was revised, and then it says data on prevalence of HIV testing and counseling among students. Okay, so now I know that this is about prevalence of HIV testing and counseling among students. Okay, I still don't know who those students are. So here the title says prevalence of HIV testing and counseling and associated factors among secondary school students in Botswana. All right, so as you see, we progress from starting out with, just a plain title to a title that gives us more information of, it is about prevalence of HIV testing and counseling. We know that they're going to be talking about other factors that are associated with HIV testing and counseling. We know that this is on secondary school students, and we know that we're talking about students in Botswana. You could put in more detail as to what those factors are, but we do have a limit in terms of what the title is. So we have to really play around with, coming up with a concise title that gives the reader a good idea of what you're going to be talking about in your abstract. Okay, so usually after the title, they're going to ask you for keywords. You want to choose between 3 to 10 words, and so look at what usually are used by the conference organizers. So these words are used to find abstracts and to do word searches. So it's good to always again look at previous abstracts and look at what they've used as keywords. But it's really easy to come up with a lot of terms, but you just want to make sure that when people are searching for your abstract on HIV prevalence in Botswana, that you have those keywords that will help them find it. Or the people who are interested in just say HIV testing and counseling, so that group will probably be pulled by those keywords of HIV testing and counseling. And so just make sure that you have words that would bring in that audience that you would expect to be interested in your topic. Okay, so here it's, how do we get started? Because some people I know get overwhelmed with coming up with the idea and then getting started. So here we have this whole strategy of review, read, think, write, and draft. So we start out with review the specific guidelines and instructions for the abstracts. So Catherine went over some of those as you saw in the first presentation, and you're going to want to go to the website and look at the specific guidelines, instructions that you need to follow as prior to starting your abstract. So I already know that from the instructions, and she called it out, that there's a 300-word limit. I want to make sure that when I'm done writing my abstract, that I'm going to end up with 300 words and not more than that, or fewer, but not more, because if I try to put it in the system, to put it in online, it may reject it, or it won't let me submit because I'm over the 300-word limit. So again, I couldn't emphasize more on, reading, previous historical abstracts from other conferences and the current conference. For example, here for the LIP conference, you want to be able to see what others have presented and look at those models and think of your target audience. Who are the ones who are going to be attending this conference? Think about the funders, think about the different organizations who are going to be at the conference. You want to be sure that you speak to that audience. And as I mentioned, write the title first or last. It's it's probably, for me, as I mentioned, I prefer to write it first because it just reminds me of, it keeps me focused on, what I am trying to talk about in that abstract, and so that I don't go off target, off topic. but you may not be ready for you to come up with your titles. So just go ahead and wait until the end, start writing your ideas, tell the story, and then draft your sections and draft them in the way in which the conference organizers have asked you to submit. So if it's introduction, methods, results, conclusion, discussion, those are the common sections, but they may have a different name to them or title. But in all, as I mentioned, it's pretty much as, set the stage, tell me what you did, tell me what you found, and tell me the so what. Okay, so next steps. After you've completed your whole abstract, you have a draft of your abstract, you want to make sure that you proofread your entire abstract. And because you probably went back and forth and changed things, and sometimes, when I write and go back and forth, I get so tired of looking at the same text that and if I go and change something, I may forget a word, and I may be seeing that word, but it's not really in there. It's because I'm so used to reading the abstract. So what I usually do is that after giving it a good review, and until my eyes are no longer catching the smaller details, then I'll ask a colleague to read it and to see if it makes sense, and to see if there's anything that can be improved, because there's always room for improvement. And involving your colleagues in doing in this review, it's really helpful because they provide really useful information. And probably you're going to submit an abstract with other co-authors, so the co-authors also need to read it and provide feedback. And this is a time where you can fine-tune the abstract to get to those areas where you may have missed, or they may come up with some other idea where it would be helpful to revise and improve. And so again, this is really important. Just don't think that you have to do it alone. There's people that can help, your co-authors, your colleagues. They're definitely a source to draw from. So here are some other helpful hints that are usually useful for writing an abstract. Or make sure that you always use an active voice and use simple sentences. Sometimes we get writer's block because we try to sound very scientific and very professional, but what helps is to really just get to the meat of what you're writing, and later on you can fine tune it and check for those active voices. Make sure, for example, when we have this example, we studied 20 HIV positive patients. This is much better than 20 HIV patients were studied. If you ask the question of who studied them, then you're not writing in the active voice. You need to be able to say, answer the question of who is it that studied them? We did. Whatever that we may be, in this case, it's probably the researchers, the implementers. You have to be very careful of just making sure that every sentence has an active voice. Check your word count. Again, it's right now for this conference, it's going to be 300 word limit. That's usually about the average of word count. So, but I would say in your initial pass, when you're first writing, do not worry so much about the word count, because that's something that as you're fine tuning and revising your abstract, you'll be able to cut down on the number of words. It's a lot easier to cut down down than to add words. So just keep that in mind, and make sure that every time that you use an abbreviation, that the first use should be spelled out, because maybe people don't know what PrEP means or other abbreviations that you use in your field, in your line of work. And so it's important that everyone is on the same page, that they understand what you're saying. And in the abstract, we avoid citations, footnotes, external quotes. We try to keep it simple, because this is the abstract is what opens the door for people to just quickly see what you're going to be presenting on. And as a reviewer, because I review many abstracts for conferences, I just read the abstract and just want to get to the point and want to see what is on there. So citations, footnotes, that is unnecessary. So here for your review of the, let me just continuing on with the review process. So there is a scientific committee that reviews the abstracts. As reviewers, I've been given score sheets where we are asked to score the abstracts on predetermined criteria. We look at the methods, we look at the topic, just different areas of looking at what makes sense for that, and for your theme. And also, if you submit an abstract that has nothing to do with the theme of the conference, then it's most likely going to get rejected, because you need to make sure that you are following those guidelines and reading about what is of interest for that particular conference. Here, want to point out what are some reasons why abstracts get rejected. Usually the number one reason is that the methods are unclear. They're not sound. You don't know what they did. You want to be sure that the methods or your approach of how you're trying to make a difference or look at a problem, that you explain that well. There's also, as I said, if you are putting in a topic that is not relevant for that conference, it'll also get kicked out. Lack of originality is also another issue. You want to be sure that some of the topics may get overused again and again. So we want to make sure that you're adding to the knowledge base. You want to be sure that your question hasn't been answered, that you're looking at a new problem, because there may be, we may have enough evidence for a specific topic where we say we know already that X, Y, or Z, that patients are that a barrier to coming to a clinic is transportation, for example, or just something, some of the things that are common knowledge may not be as appealing as other more innovative topics. And the findings are not presented. Sometimes they'll say results are forthcoming, and usually in conferences they don't the reviewers don't like to see that. We want to make sure that we know what you're going to be presenting. We know that those findings are ready, and that we can present. There are exceptions to this rule. I would say that sometimes conferences will let you slide by with just preliminary results. We don't want them to be very raw or preliminary, that you haven't done your data cleaning and you're still at that stage. We want to make sure that they are close to being the final results. And then the conclusions are not linked to the data. This is also a problem. As I said earlier, make sure that everything that you say at the end, it's based on what you found in your results. And then Again, so here, think about the 4 C's: complete, concise, clear, and cohesive. We want to make sure that you cover the major parts of your study or your approach or whatever it was that you did. Be concise, no unnecessary words, and we'll talk more about that shortly. The abstract has to be readable, well organized, with very little jargon. So again, you have an outline, you have a template of what to follow, and that helps you to move the writing, to keep it clear. And then cohesive, you want the sections to flow smoothly, that they're logical, that you go from one, so it's again telling the story of giving, just like you would tell your grandmother, your friend, a story. You first set the stage, you tell them, a little bit about the background, you tell them what you did, you tell them what you found, and then what it all means. You have your punchline. So here, I just want to go over some technical writing tips. It applies to the abstract as well as any other type of writing, but in what follows, we want to think about writing your abstract. So um, here are some technical writing common issues that we see in abstracts, where sentences just keep going and going and going, and there's no period to be found. And so we want to make sure that sometimes we can break, even if they end up being short sentences, it's easier for the reader to follow those short sentences than just a run-on sentence that just keeps going. We want to make sure that we have their correct punctuation. We want to be able to use commas where they go, semicolons, and we can get more into this. I see a lot on the abstracts that I review, this inconsistency and capitalization, or the overuse of capital letters. I don't know why. There's just something that people love putting capital letters. I don't know if it's to attract, to get more attention or what, but be very consistent. And then if something's going to be capitalized, for example, we know an acronym such as dreams, you would always capitalize dreams. So the next time you use it, you're not gonna have uppercase D and then the rest lowercase. So just be consistent with that. And we mentioned this, the acronyms are to be spelled out the first time that they're used. Make sure that you use your spell checker, that you find out for the conference whether they accept, if the language of choice for that conference is American English or British English. Just be sure that your spell checker is set so that it can pick up those differences in spelling. And then be careful with the sentence structure, which is something that other colleagues, if English is not your first language, then other colleagues may be able to help you with this. Here are some punctuation tips. We want to make sure, like I said, no run-on sentences. We want to make sure that for most of in abstract, especially, we're going to have sentences that just end with periods, and probably you're not going to be using much of exclamation marks, maybe some question marks there. Keep in mind that for spacing, you have single spacing or double spacing, depending on what is required, what the guidelines are. Make sure that you know what they are and stick to that. So don't have a sentence that, sentences with single spacing and then double spacing. Just make whatever you choose, just be consistent with it. And commas used to separate ideas. Use commas in numbers greater than 1,000. this part on footnotes should be used at the end of a sentence. Well, as I mentioned in the abstract, you would not actually be putting in footnotes. It's when you are writing a paper, or you have more room to add text, then you would do that. Remember that using lists, you have bullets. You can use bulleted points, and that you want to introduce that list with a complete sentence followed by a colon, 2 dots, and then you first capitalize the first item in each bullet. So as you see the example here, this word to capitalize. Be careful with the capitalization. Sometimes, as I said, things tend to get over capitalized. Make sure that of course, the required capitalization is first word in a title, first word after a colon, figures and tables, they're capitalized, first word, and formal names of governments, agencies, and organizations. Here I have some examples of what you could use to capitalize proper names. So for example, here Mbale district is in Uganda. Here the word district gets capitalized because it's referring to Mbale district in Uganda. But when we talk about here is a small district in Zambia, then this is we're just talking about, we're not referring to the proper name. And so here we use lowercase. And there are some similar examples. I'm going to skip through this, just being cognizant of time. But now, I'm also wanting to show you here that terminology and preferred language, we want to be sure that we use the right terminology. And for example, this is one for drug users. I see this one come up a lot, and people are, some people may not be aware that the more respectful term is now people who inject drugs. The same for those of us who have worked a lot with key populations and with sex workers, the term prostitute is not a term that we would want to use in in any type of language, I would say, but especially for scientific conferences or scientific professional writing. The term, a lot of us know as sex workers. So here I have a link of UNAIDS terminology guidelines that is really helpful to help you determine what are the words that could be used easily, where they're being respectful of these different populations. So here, in terms of basic tips of the writing piece, remember the passive voice should not be used. Make sure that you're able to say who did what when. We want to be able to use an active voice. Cut out on the necessary adjectives. So for here, if you're scrambling and trying to get rid of words because you've gone over the 300 word limit, notice, a notice, usually comes in advance. So, you don't need to write the word advance. Notice would do just fine. So here, you could make this word into one, and then that saves you yet another word. Because if you say, well, first of all, you could say malaria is uncommon. But the point that this is trying to say here is malaria is not uncommon. This is a double negative. So watch out with the not and the uncommon. And then be sure, again, with those run-on sentences, be sure that the average number of words for a sentence should be around 20 words. If you're getting, more into the 40, 50, then you need to split up that sentence into 2 sentences or maybe 3.
Sorry to interrupt just quickly, Carolina. Just wanted to let you know that I'm going to launch the poll right now, just so that people don't wonder what pops up on the screen.
Okay, yes, but are people still able to see the screen?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, great. So I know we're getting close to time. So I just want to leave you with some of, just be consistent in the way that you write. And there are guides on helping you how to write and look at, the way you organize your writing. I'm going to run through this to, can I just see? Did I close your poll?
Nope, you're good. If you close your
Okay.
screen, it won't close mine.
Okay, good. All right, because I want to move to the next one. Yeah, and here I have some tips in terms of, remember, either goes with or, neither goes with nor. We use the term respectively as an adverb, which means in the order given. So you see the example below. For men, the proportion of hospital admissions rose from 1.8% in 1998 to 1.8% in a decade later. For women, those figures were 7.5% and 16.3% respectively. So we wouldn't go back and say 7.5% in 1998 and 16.3% a decade later. So by using respectively, we get rid of having to use those terms again. Right, so common mistakes to avoid, punctuation. Remember that quotes, when you have quotes, the period or whatever punctuation goes inside the quotes. This one is something that I see a lot, the IE. It means that is, and the abbreviation for it is so IE, and it's usually followed by a comma. So look at the example here, IE and comma. So 2 periods and a comma. So make sure that that happens. People tend to forget this comma here. Don't know why. So here, this is just to, if you read this, I have a spelling checker. Remember, sometimes a spelling checker may not catch those spelling mistakes. So this is, again, useful for when you have a colleague that can check your writing, because here, all of this made it through the spell checker. The words are definitely spelled correctly, but they're not the words that we mean to use in these two paragraphs. I have this list of words that I like to put on a diet, and I can share this with you when we share the slides. But basically, these are words where you can easily cut out so that you can have, when you're going through your abstract for the second or maybe 50th time around, and you're trying to cut down on words because you're going over that 300 word limit, you can definitely use some of these to just cut out words. For example, past history. We know history is in the past, so you don't have to say past history. We'll be able to, it could just be one word can. So I'm not going to read through them, but that can give you an idea. So we have a long list of this word. So whenever you're trying to cut down on words for your abstract, you can look at these to see if it falls into any of these. But these are examples of many redundant or wordy phrases that we tend to use, and where it's not really needed. Let's see. So here, as I mentioned, there are many resources that we can use to help us with our writing, and I have listed them here. Some of them, yeah, they will take people who are interested in writing publications, scientific publications, or just abstracts, and give you tips on, how to write them. And sometimes they assign a mentor where you can actually get direct help from somebody to help you, review your abstract. They won't write it for you, but they will give you tips on how to write abstracts that are interesting and can get accepted. So in summary, I just want to make sure that you leave with the idea that it's really easy to write an abstract. If you follow the directions, it's just like a recipe, a cookbook that you follow, because they give you the template, they give you the instructions on what to write. And it's up to you to come up with your great story and your so what factor, and make sure that you practice and practice a lot. This is like an art, or like cooking. The more you do it, the better you get at it. So at the beginning, it may be hard, but as the more you do it, the easier it gets, and you'll definitely find it to be an enjoyable process, especially once you get your acceptance letter saying that your abstract has been accepted. And if it does get rejected, don't worry. I mean, there's always the next conference, and sometimes abstracts get rejected for reasons beyond our control. Sometimes they just don't have enough spots to accept so many posters, or have speakers. So I mean, there are various factors. It's not just you in terms of writing an abstract. It could be others. So not to fret, there's always the next conference. So with that, I will end this presentation.
Oh, actually, we have two quick questions, so maybe we can try and get them in. We have about 3 minutes left. So the first one is, how best do we reflect qualitative data in an abstract?
That's a great question. So with qualitative findings, okay, number one, I would say make sure that you explain your methods, because it's a lot easier for people, or it tends to be what I've noticed, is that people with quantitative skills, or that have done surveys and all, or use numbers, it's easy to explain those. It's a lot more challenging to explain qualitative data. So first, explain what you did, be very concise. But then the part about presenting the results, when you have limited space in an abstract, you're gonna want to just give the main themes, the takeaways of what you're trying to get to your story. Once that abstract is, and you may throw in a quote here or one or two, but I would say do not fill that abstract with quotes. Instead, give the themes, the major, big picture. And then once you get accepted, then your poster or your talk or your paper will have more of those quotes, that they take up a lot of room. So in an abstract, you have to be very frugal with your words, and so that it's just a matter of playing around. But I would say play around with the wording, but also just make sure that you take a step back, that you don't go into all of the detail of those quotes and all of the data that you found. As interesting as it may be to hear the quotes, it's just better to save that for when it's the actual presentation.
Perfect. And we're almost at time, but there was one last question. And the question is it okay to have references in the abstract?
I would say for most part, no. You don't want references, you don't want footnotes, unless that conference requires it. But in most of them, no. They just want to see those topics that I mentioned. And then when you get accepted, if your abstract gets accepted, you may have at the end, if it's a poster, you put your references there, or in whatever presentation, PowerPoint presentation, or whatever it may be. But I would say save the references for later, unless you're instructed to provide them by the conference organizers.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you again to Catherine and to Carolina for wonderful presentation today. And just a reminder that it'll be available as a recording and also as presentation notes. And we'll send an email out with links to those by the end of the week. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and thank you to USAID for all the support. Have a great day, everybody.
Great. Thank you, Susan, for moderating.
Thank you.